Hey guys, so in this video we're going to talk about midpoint as part of coordinate geometry and linear relationships. Now, by the end of this video, you should be able to calculate the midpoint of an interval by substituting the values from the midpoint formula. So what is midpoint? Well, it's basically the word midpoint, the exact middle point or the halfway point between 2 points on a line. And we basically are finding the average of the x coordinates and the average of the y coordinates to find the exact middle. Just like you may remember we do when we have stats and we have two scores that we need to find the middle of. Now the answer that we get will give us a coordinate, and that's why you'll see a comma in the middle. And I'll go through this a little bit later on, but that coordinate has an x value and a y value. And the midpoint is represented by a capital M. Now, can you think why it's represented by a capital M? Why not a small m? Can you think of anything that is represented by a small m? Well, if you remember, in coordinate geometry, y equals mx plus b, the m, or the gradient, is represented by a small m. So midpoint is represented by a capital M. Let's go through the midpoint formula. Now, the midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 over 2, which is the average of the x points, comma, y1 plus y2 over 2, the average of the y points. Now, you'll be familiar with x1 and x2 and y1 and y2 if you've done the distance formula before. But be very careful when substituting negative numbers into the formula, because a positive and a negative will become a negative. So you need to make sure your directed numbers are there. And if you're typing it all into the calculator, make sure you use brackets correctly. So let's go through the steps very quickly, and then we'll go through an example. So the steps are: label one of the points x1 and y1, and the second point x2 and y2, and it doesn't matter which one you label. And when we do the examples, we'll go through these steps again just to link it in. You substitute the values into that formula in the blue there, and you simplify. So let's do example 1, and I'll move this screen up once I've done example 1, and we can look at midpoint formula and the steps in the example together. The example says, calculate the midpoint of the interval between the points 6, 3 and negative 3 and 1. Now remember step 1, label one of the points x1 and y1. I've labeled the first one as x1, y1, because x and a y point, and the second one as x2 and y2. Then step 2 says, substitute that into the formula. So the formula says x1 plus x2 over 2. So x1 is 6, x2 is negative 3. So it's 6 plus negative 3. Now see here how a plus and a minus makes a big difference. And when I put it in brackets, I see that plus minus becomes a plus. So that's 6 plus 3. Sorry, 6 minus 3, which is 3. And the next one is y1 plus y2. So you have 3 plus 1, which is 4 over 2. So now we have 3 over 2 and 4 over 2. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now, if I can make it a decimal, it's always recommended to make it into the decimal form, because plotting a fractional coordinate is a little bit difficult. It's easier to plot 1.5 than 3 over 2. But if the decimal continues and it's not a terminating decimal, then always leave it as a fraction. Let's go on to example B. Example B says, again, two coordinates. I labeled one as x1, y1, and the other one is x2, y2. I sub them into the formula, but be very careful of plus minuses. That will change the answer. Once I sub in x1, x2, y1, and y2, I get minus 1, minus 6, which is negative 7, and minus 2, which is negative 4. Minus 7 divided by 2 is negative 3.5, and minus 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. So now we've done calculating the midpoint from points that are given. How about when points are not given? So you're just given a graph like you see in 2a and 2b. Well, it's the same steps. You just have to do one extra step, and that step is that you have to find the coordinates of each point. So for example here, point E, I had to write the coordinates down, and point F, I had to write the coordinates down as well. So for point E, we crawled to 1 and we climbed to 4. And for point F, we crawled to 4 and climbed to 1. And then I just substitute it into the formula until I find the exact middle point. One will be an X coordinate, one will be a Y coordinate. So the exact middle of 2A is 2.5 and 2.5. So if I zoom into this and I use another color, my exact middle of E and F is 2.5, which is there, approximately, and 2.5, which is there, approximately. So the exact middle of that line is right there. And that's what we're finding. We're finding the exact middle, and sometimes it'll be a decimal, but you'll see the exact middle of that line is that pink point there. So now with example B, again, we found the coordinates of G and H, and I chucked them into the formula, simplified, and I got -5 and 3.5. Hopefully those examples made sense. Make sure you jot them down with your own notes. I've got a few questions here that I'd like you to do. Pause the video, go through the questions, and refer back to the examples if you need to. Okay, you should be done by now. There's your recommended answers. Hopefully you got them all right. Till next time, take care.